Hey there, Comics Alliance fans. This is Matt Wilson, co-host and producer of the War Rocket Ajax podcast, and I'm back once again to bring you an advance clip of next week's episode of War Rocket Ajax. We're going to be talking about some of the comics that came out this week on this week's show. We're going to be talking about Future's End #1. We're going to be talking about Rat Queens #6, and we're going to be talking about Moon Knight #3. Be sure to check out the full episode of War Rocket Ajax when it goes up on Monday at noon at warrocketajax.com. We're going to be talking with Jai Nitz, the writer of Dark Horse Comics' Dream Thief. But for now, here are these reviews.
Where are we going to start, Matt? Where are we going to start this week?
I think we got to start with Future's End #1.
Start with the end of the future.
Let's start with the end of the futures. There's no apostrophe in the title.
That is true.
It is.
Although I guess if there is an ending in the present, it is the end of all possible future.
I don't know what it means. I guess because there is the far future, that was the #0 issue, and then the current issues starting with #1 take place 5 years from now.
That's 5 years from now, which is 5 years after the events of JLA #1.
So 10 years after JLA #1.
So 10 years after Justice League, and we're 3 years into the New 52?
Yep.
There's a lot of math in DC Comics that I'm not comfortable with.
Well, I mean, there's a number in the New 52. You gotta expect it. Yeah. But I'm gonna start on a positive when we're talking about Future's End, because I know we're gonna go negative.
All right.
I love this cover by Ryan Sook. It is this comic has a fair this is a beautiful cover for a comic. It promises like kind of a sci-fi opera, right?
Yeah, I would say that is the motif.
When you crack it open, lock the gates. This thing is a clusterfuck.
I don't know if I would say lock the gates, but I definitely agree with you on that point. Can we talk about how the very first thing that happens in this comic is that Terry McGinnis, Batman, punches a woman in the head and her head explodes?
Now,
but it's okay because she's a cyborg?
She's a cyborg.
Dead anyway?
She's a cyborg. And look, we've seen, Terry McGinnis destroy robots in Batman Beyond the cartoon, right?
Yes.
The difference here is that there's brain matter that appears when he smashes this cyborg's head. I think we should mention this. Last week, or on Free Comic Book Day, you wrote a review of Future's End #0.
I was very mad at it.
Which you called a smorgasbord of misery and death.
I actually called it, get it right, Wilson, I called it a depressing smorgasbord of death and mutilation.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was pretty close.
You were both apply.
This issue doesn't have a death on every page, which I guess is a step in the right direction. However, it is still full of just needless characters dying.
They had the issue that was set in the future, right? The 0 issue is set in the future. And the argument is, if you're pro Future's End, the argument could be that doing the dystopian future where all the heroes are dead is a pretty classic setup. There's nothing wrong with that setup inherently.
It's Days of Future Past.
Yeah. What bugs me about it is that they've done it 5 times in 3 years. That it's the plot of Injustice, that it's the plot of that DC MMORPG, that they've done it before in the New 52 even. If your argument is that, okay, that's just what the setup issue is going to be, well then he comes back to another future, a nearer future, and there are still people dying all the time. There's still a lot of people getting killed.
By the time we get to the grifter scene in this comic.
Oh, the grifter scene.
And I'll tell you what the grifter scene is. The grifter scene is Grifter going to a house in North Carolina and killing an innocent family. As far as we can tell, this family is just normal, innocent people, right?
If we remember Grifter from the launch of the New 52, they are presumably I guess they're Damonites, because Grifter is Rom Space Knight, basically.
Right.
With Daemonites instead of Dire Wraiths.
Well,
so
okay.
We know that, theoretically.
Well, we see them running away in fear. Like, they're not turning and fighting him. They're running away and cowering in fear. The only character we see, like, with the glowing eyes being mad at him, almost about to attack him, is a tiny little girl.
A tiny little girl that Grifter shoots in the face, but it's okay because she's an evil tiny little girl. Just like Terry McGinnis punches a woman in her brains in the first sequence, but it's okay because she's a cyborg. There's a lot of weird violence that is situationally okay, that is weird.
By the time we got to that Grifter part, I was laughing out loud. Like, I was just this reads like a parody of a DC comic. The fact
Zero,
that
when the arm got cut off in Zero, that's when I lost it. I laughed so hard.
Well, the fact that this comic ends with a character death, like, how is that surprising? But what I said on Twitter was, pretty soon Future's End is going to have to start surprising us by having characters not die.
Are you talking about the violent death with multiple impalements that ends this issue?
That's right.
What's going on in this comic?
Characters are just dying. That is all that has happened.
The Authority gets killed. The Authority and Hawkman, which is hilarious.
Speaking of Days of Future Past, Apollo dies exactly like Wolverine in Days of Future Past.
Yes.
In that he's incinerated and you see his skeleton. I mean, he's not incinerated by a sentinel, but he's incinerated and, like, he's got visible skeleton. It's a reminiscent panel to that cover.
And again, look, you can compare this comic pretty easily to Batman Eternal. Say what you will about Batman Eternal, and I think we were a little harsh on that first issue, in terms of the script not really going with the art as well as it could. You could tell, like, that was a Scott Snyder comic. Like, it had the signature quirks of Scott Snyder. I mean, which I like. It
had a lot of dying in it, which
yes.
I could have done without, but it was building to a plot.
The one that comes out this week, like, you can tell that if you're familiar with James Tynion IV, you can tell that this is an issue he wrote. You could tell that the last issue, it read like a John Layman comic that just, had other people consulting on the writing. Future's End is Brian Azzarello, Jeff Lemire, Dan Jurgens, and Keith Giffen, and I get none of those writers from this.
Yeah,
I said this about Zero, that it doesn't feel like it was written so much as it just is out. Like, it was issued from DC Comics. I like, to varying degrees, all of those creators.
Every single one of those writers is good. Patrick Zircher is an artist I like a lot. But the end product of this comic, there's nothing to it.
I don't...
And let's be clear here. The reason that the character who is dead on the last page of this comic, and I'll just say it's Green Arrow. The reason he's dead...
What's Green Arrow 5 years from now?
The reason he's dead is because Firestorm, or at least Ronnie Raymond, is fucking in a storeroom.
No, you're absolutely correct.
So the only character thing we have in here that's not killing is fucking in a storeroom.
Guys, I like Firestorm. I like Firestorm a lot. I like Jason Rush, Firestorm. I like Ronnie Raymond, Firestorm. I think Firestorm's a cool character. I don't think Firestorm really works. Like, I think Firestorm works when there's a contrast between the two characters, which is obviously what they're going for with, studious Jason Rush and party jock Ronnie Raymond. But what they have done is make, like, superhero Jason Rush and fucking asshole Ronnie Raymond.
Here's what I think it ultimately comes down to. It sounds like, from what we're saying right now, and maybe if you read Chris's review of Zero, it maybe sounded like we are just down on comic book violence. Like extreme violence in a comic book. And I don't feel that way at all.
I love violence.
There are plenty of comics with extreme violence that I'm a huge fan of. Preacher. I like quite a few of the arcs in The Authority. I like stuff with extreme violence. But the violence has to serve a story. And as far as I can tell from Future's End 0 and 1, there isn't one.
Yeah, like, I've said it many times. Like, Matt, you and I have a combined 50 years of comics reading experience.
Yes.
We've been reading comics for a very long time. We think about comics a lot. We understand comics, I think. We are comics creators. We are comics readers. I don't understand this comic and why it exists. I don't understand what I'm getting out of it. I don't understand what is happening in it. I don't understand it. And I'm 40 pages into it.
Here's just a shining light example of what I'm talking about how this comic doesn't have a story 2 issues in. The first thing Terry McGinnis says in this comic on page 1 is he talks to his asshole robot butler, Alfred.
Which I do not understand. I don't understand why computer Alfred is an asshole. And he's a huge fucking asshole.
He says, "So now what, Alfred? Even Batman Beyond, who went back in time to do something, doesn't know what he's there to do."
Well, he went back in time to kill a guy because Batman told him to kill a guy.
Yeah, but, what is he actually doing? We know he's stopping the bad future, but we don't know any of the details.
40 pages in.
All we know is that there's a bad future, and that Batman Beyond went back in time to stop it. That is it.
This is a weekly book, so obviously it's designed to be played out with a little bit of a longer leash than a monthly comic. At the same time, we knew what the deal was at the end of Batman Eternal #1.
There was a hook. Gordon was being accused of a terrible crime.
Yes.
This doesn't have that at all. Yeah, it's got bad future. Batman Beyond goes back to stop it somehow by killing a guy.
You talked about us liking comics about violence. So, Matt, let's talk about a comic with some violence in it.
Okay.
That came out this week.
That's going to be... Well, we're actually going to talk about 2 comics with violence in them that we liked. But we'll talk about this one first. Rat Queens #6.
Yes, Rat Queens #6. I actually did an interview with Kurtis Wiebe not too long ago about Rat Queens after I jumped on board. Rat Queens #6, if you have not read it, is the start of a new arc. The first paperback is out and it's $10. I cannot recommend this book enough, especially if you were a fan of the John Rogers and Andrea DeVito Dungeons & Dragons comic, which is one of my favorite fantasy comics of all time. If you liked that but wished it was about extremely foul-mouthed women, then you need to read Rat Queens, which is amazing. Believe it or not, there is very little violence in this issue, except for Gary gets threatened with a bottle and punched in the face. And if you've read the first arc, you will be delighted to hear that. This issue is the sort of aftermath of the first story arc. It ends with the Rat Queens win, and they have a big party, and they all get drunk out of their minds at the party and do a bunch of drugs. This issue is the hangover issue, where they all wake up having made some either good or bad decisions that night, and then get ready to get set on their next adventure. They are once again sent out by the town to do some stuff, and they get in a fight with myconids, which are mushroom people, which are an actual thing in the world of Dungeons & Dragons that are now being adapted into non-copyright infringing fantasy. And this book is so much fun. It's beautifully drawn. Every character is super engaging and witty. They're really, there's a moment in here that's really kind of heartwarming in a way that you don't expect. There's, crazy violence. There's crazy, gross out stuff. There's a great gross out last page. It's just a solid book. And what makes it work where other comics don't is that the characters are so well realized. The characters stuff is there and is immediately engaging. You know exactly who these characters are and what they want and what the ongoing plot is. You worry about people because, Lord knows that the people in this comic are in danger. This is the 7th issue of a indie book from Image, so nobody is guaranteed to be here next month. This issue, like I said, it's the start of a new arc, but if you want to jump on, imagecomics.com sells it digitally, DRM free in CBZ, or PDF, CBZ, CBR, and EPUB formats. You can also get it on Comixology. You could also get the paperback for $10, which you really need to do. It is an amazing comic by Kurtis Wiebe and Upchurch. Now, Matt, have you jumped on it yet?
I have read the first issue. I've still got to catch up with all the rest of the issues. I keep seeing just random panels on Tumblr that make me laugh. So
it is a very Tumblr-friendly comic.
Yeah, it's definitely
in the good ways.
It's definitely one I'm going to pick up. While we're on the topic of comics that we love, now we talked about the first issue of the new Moon Knight series,
yes,
by Warren Ellis and Declan Shalvey, and how much we enjoyed that.
And Jordie
Bellaire, yes. The first issue was really good. The second issue was good. The third issue came out this week, and it blew me away with how much I loved it. I said on Twitter that I did not know how much I needed a comic about Moon Knight fighting ghost punks in my life. I read this issue with a big smile on my face the entire time. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and say straight up that this, like the previous two issues, is a self-contained, done-in-one story, and the ending is kind of just a blow-off. It's just a way to end this story that Warren Ellis clearly wanted to write. This is a story about Moon Knight, Mark Spector, running into a street gang on the streets of New York, being mad that there's a street gang, trying to fight them, and then realizing that they're ghosts, and they're all punks. He gets really upset that he can't punch them, can't beat them up, so he goes back to his mansion, talks to Khonshu, gets geared up to go fight ghosts, and then there is a full-page splash page of him just destroying a ghost punk's head with a punch that is beautiful. It is so good. But
it's okay because it's a ghost.
Yeah, it's great. It's so good. And then on the following, maybe 2 pages later, there's a panel of like Moon Knight in his crazy ghost fighting gear with his dukes up, and what he says is, "So here's the thing, I hate ghosts."
Did Jordan Witt guest write this issue?
I don't know.
This issue that's all about ghost punching?
Ghost punk punching. Right now, I am not even joking. It is my single issue of the year. Moon Knight number 3. I love it to death. It is, in some ways, I feel like this issue was written specifically for me.
It's the best Warren Ellis comic in years, and Declan and Jordie are making it look absolutely gorgeous. I don't think we can say enough good things about Moon Knight.
As an avowed
Which is
fan,
a crazy phrase to be speaking.
Yeah, as an avowed fan of the movie Repo Man, this movie about crazy green glowing ghost punks it speaks to me. That does it for this week's clip from War Rocket Ajax here on ComicsAlliance.com. Once again, if you would like to check out the full episode where we talk to Jai Nitz of Dark Horse Comics Dream Thief, we add some news stories to our Every Story Ever list, and we do checks and recs as we always do. Be sure to head over to warrocketajax.com on Monday and download the full episode, or you can get us on iTunes. We're there under War Rocket Ajax. Until next week, everybody, thanks for listening.